Emma Hartley's hand closed around the handle of that knife the moment Vernon McRae's fingers touched her wrist. Her whole body was shaking, not from fear, not anymore, but from something harder. Something that had been building inside her chest for 3 long years behind that saloon bar. She was done being afraid. She was done being quiet. And if this was the night she died for it, then so be it. If this story moves you, hit subscribe and follow Emma's journey all the way to the end. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. The summer of 1873 sat heavy over Dusty Springs, like a wool blanket that nobody asked for and nobody could take off. The heat came up off the dirt streets in visible waves by mid-morning, and by late afternoon, the whole town smelled like horse sweat sawdust and something sour underneath it all. The particular stink of people who had been grinding themselves down to nothing for too long. Red Canyon Saloon was the loudest building on the main street and the most dishonest. Every surface in the place was sticky. The mirror behind the bar was cracked in 2 places, and the owner, a hollow-eyed man named Gus Pelly, had never once in 7 years seen fit to replace it. The piano in the corner was missing 3 keys. The curtains on the windows had been red once maybe, but years of tobacco smoke had turned them the color of old blood. Emma Hartley moved through all of it like she had grown up inside its walls, because she had. She was 22 years old, and she had been carrying trays and pouring drinks in Red Canyon Saloon since she was 16, first to help her mother pay off a debt that her father left behind when he disappeared, and then just to keep herself fed after her mother passed. She was not a saloon girl in the way that some men like to imagine when they heard the phrase. She served drinks. She kept the books. She broke up arguments before they turned into something worse, usually with nothing more than a look and a word or two said in exactly the right tone. She was good at her work because she had learned early that being good at her work was the only armor she had. She had dark brown hair she kept pinned back during her shifts, green eyes that most men noticed eventually, and a way of holding herself very still when she was angry that her mother used to say was more frightening than shouting. She was not tall. She was not the strongest person in any room she walked into. But there was something in her spine, some quality of refusal that people noticed even when they could not name it. She noticed Cole Harrison the moment he walked through the saloon doors, the same way she always noticed anything that didn't fit the usual pattern of her evenings. He came in around 8 o'clock when the saloon was full and loud, and the air was thick with pipe smoke and the smell of cheap whiskey. He was a tall man somewhere in his middle 30s, with the kind of face that had been out in the sun for a long time. His hat was brown, pushed back slightly on his head. His coat was dust-colored and worn through at the elbows. He wore a Colt Peacemaker on his right hip, with the ease of a man who had been wearing one so long he'd stopped noticing the weight. He moved through the crowded room like he was accustomed to rooms full of strangers, not comfortable exactly, but not threatened either. He took a table in the far corner with his back to the wall, and he ordered 1 whiskey, and he nursed it. Emma watched him for about 30 seconds, before she decided he was not going to be a problem, and went back to her work. Vernon McRae arrived an hour later. Vernon was 46 years old, and owned the largest cattle ranch in the county, along with 3 parcels of farmland, a general store, and what everyone in Dusty Springs understood to be the sheriff's loyalty. He was a broad man, gone soft around the middle in the last few years, but still carrying the physical confidence of someone who had never once been made to answer for anything he did. He had pale gray eyes and a close-trimmed beard, and he always wore the same black hat, which he never took off indoors, which Emma had always thought said something about him that he didn't realize it said. He came in with 2 of his men, Deke Harlan and a newer one everyone called Rook, for reasons nobody had ever explained, and they took the table nearest the bar, which was Vernon's usual spot, and Deke hollered for Emma before they'd even settled into their chairs. "Miss Hartley, Vernon's table needs attention." Emma picked up a bottle and 3 glasses and went over. "Evening, Mr. McRae," she said. She set a glass in front of each of them and poured without waiting to be asked. "Emma." Vernon said her name the way he always said it, slow and deliberate, like he was tasting it. "You look tired." "Long day," she said. "You need someone to take care of you," he said. "I've told you that. I'm managing fine on my own, she said. She kept her voice even. She had been keeping her voice even around Vernon McCrae for 3 years. The debt was the problem. The debt was always the problem. Her father had borrowed $400 from Vernon McCrae before Emma was born, some arrangement for land or stock that had never been properly documented, and Vernon had been holding that debt over the Hartley family ever since. When Emma's mother died, Vernon had come to Emma with a piece of paper handwritten unsigned by anyone but her father, who was long gone, and told her that the debt had passed to her along with everything else her mother left behind. Emma had gone to see a lawyer in the next town about it. The lawyer had read the paper carefully and told her that it probably wasn't legally enforceable, probably wasn't valid, probably wouldn't hold up if she contested it. But probably cost money to fight, he said, and money was the one thing Emma didn't have. So she paid what she could a little every month, and Vernon accepted the payments not because he needed the money, but because the arrangement kept Emma in a position of obligation. She understood this. She had understood it for a long time. But understanding something and having the means to change it were two different things entirely. "Sit down a minute," Vernon said. "I'm working," Emma said. "Gus won't mind." He looked toward the bar where Gus was very carefully not looking in their direction. "Will you, Gus?" It was not a question. Gus shook his head without turning around. Emma sat down. She kept the bottle in her hand. "I've been thinking," Vernon said, "about your situation, about the debt." "My payments are current," Emma said. "They are," he agreed. "You're a responsible young woman. I've always said so." He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. "That's why I think it's time we came to a better arrangement. Something more permanent." Emma looked at his hand on hers. She did not pull away. Not yet. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, though she was entirely sure. "I think you do," he said. "I've got a good house, good land. You wouldn't have to work in a place like this anymore." He glanced around the saloon with exactly the kind of expression that told her he considered it beneath her, as though he had not spent years making sure she had no other options. "You'd be provided for. The debt would be gone. And in exchange," Emma said. "In exchange," he said, "you'd be my wife." The saloon was loud enough around them that nobody nearby could have heard it. But Emma felt the word land in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. She thought about her mother, who had spent 20 years making herself small for a man who left anyway. She thought about the $400 she had been paying off for 3 years against a debt she hadn't created and couldn't verify. She thought about the lawyer and his word probably, and the way he'd said it apologetically, like he was sorry she couldn't afford justice. She thought about what it would mean to say yes. "No," Emma said. Vernon's hand tightened on hers. "I don't think you're understanding me," he said. His voice had changed. The pleasantness was still there on the surface, but underneath it, something had shifted, gone flat and cold. "I understand you perfectly," Emma said. "The answer is no." She stood up. She picked up the empty tray from the edge of the table, and she walked back toward the bar, and for about 4 steps she thought that was going to be the end of it for the evening. Then Vernon's chair scraped back. She heard it, and she heard Deke say something low, and then Vernon's hand was on her arm, pulling her around hard enough that she stumbled. "You don't walk away from me," Vernon said. The saloon went quiet. Not all at once, but in a spreading circle, out from where they were standing. Conversations dying one by one, as people turned and saw Vernon McCrae with his hand on Emma Hartley's arm, and the look on his face that told them this was not something they wanted to involve themselves in. Emma looked at the hand on her arm. She looked up at Vernon's face. "Let go of me," she said. "You owe me," he said. "Your father owed me. Your mother owed me. And now you owe me. That's not something you just walk away from." "I've been paying your debt for 3 years," Emma said. "Every month, every single month. You let go of my arm right now." "Or what?" Vernon said. Emma's free hand found the small knife she kept at her belt, the one she used for cutting twine on supply crates, the one she'd started carrying because the world was full of men like Vernon McCrae. Her fingers wrapped around the handle. She felt of the metal against her palm. She didn't pull it. Not yet. But Vernon's eyes dropped to her hand, and his face changed again. "You put that away," he said very quietly. "You let go of my arm," Emma said. "Little girl," Vernon said, "you do not want to make an enemy of me." "You've been my enemy since the day you walked into my mother's house with that paper," Emma said. "The only difference is now I'm saying it out loud." Vernon pulled her forward close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, and his other hand came up toward her face. Not a slap, not yet, but the threat of one. The raised hand hanging in the air between them, and the whole saloon was watching, and not one single person was moving. Not one person, except the man in the corner. "I'd put that hand down," said a voice. It was a quiet voice. Not loud, not performing for the room, just a statement flat and certain the way you might state that the sky was blue, or that a fire was hot. Everyone looked. Cole Harrison was standing up from his corner table. He hadn't crossed the room yet. He was just standing there, his hands loose at his sides, his hat still pushed back on his head, looking at Vernon with an expression that Emma couldn't immediately name. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something quieter than anger. Something that had been past anger a long time ago, and arrived somewhere on the other side of it. "This isn't your business," Vernon said. "Man raises his hand to a woman, it tends to become everybody's business," Cole said. He took one step toward them, then another. The crowd shifted back, not dramatically, but enough. "I'd recommend you let go of her arm." "You know who I am," Vernon said. "I know who you are," Cole said. He had reached a point about 6 feet from Vernon now, and he stopped. "Vernon McCrae. Own about half this county from what I understand. Sheriff's on your payroll. Few judges, too, I'd expect." He tilted his head slightly. "I've met men like you in every town between here and New Mexico. You tend to believe your money makes you something it doesn't." Vernon stared at him. Deke Harlan's hand moved toward his hip. Cole's draw was so fast that Emma almost missed it. One moment his hand was loose at his side, and the next the Colt peacemaker was level and steady, pointed at Deke's chest, and Cole hadn't even looked away from Vernon. "I wouldn't," Cole said, still not looking at Deke. Deke froze. "You're pointing a gun in my saloon," Vernon said. "Your saloon," Cole said. "Though I notice Gus Pelly's name above the door. Funny arrangement." He lowered the gun about 2 inches, enough to be less immediately threatening, not enough to be less immediately dangerous. "Let go of the lady's arm, Mr. McCrae. This is the last time I'm going to say it." Vernon held Emma's arm for 3 more seconds. Emma counted them. Then he let go. He stepped back. He smoothed the front of his coat. He picked up his hat from where it had shifted and adjusted it on his head very deliberately, the way men like him performed dignity when they felt they'd lost some. "You're making a mistake," he said to Cole. "Made worse ones," Cole said. Vernon looked at Emma. The look was a promise, specific and cold. "We'll finish this conversation," he said. "No," Emma said. "We won't." Vernon walked out. Deke followed. Rook, who had not moved through the entire exchange, stood up, slowly, looked at Cole for a long moment, and then walked out behind them. The saloon held its breath for about 4 seconds. Then someone went back to their drink, and someone else said something to the person beside them, and in another minute, the noise had come back up to approximately where it had been, because that was what saloons did. Events happened, and then life moved back around them, like water around a stone. Emma turned to face Cole Harrison. Her heart was hammering. Her hand was still tight around the knife she hadn't pulled. "Thank you," she said. The words felt inadequate. Cole holstered the Colt with the same unhurried ease with which he'd drawn it. "You had it in hand," he said. "I just moved the timeline." "He could have killed you for that," Emma said. "He could have tried," Cole said. There was no bravado in it, just the same flat statement of fact. "Who are you?" Emma said. "Cole Harrison." He said it like it didn't require explanation, which to most people it probably didn't. But Emma was not most people, and she had been behind this bar long enough to hear things. "The bounty hunter," she said. "Among other things." he said. What other things? He looked at her for a moment. Something moved in his eyes. Not evasion exactly, more like the careful consideration of how much to say. Other things, he said again, and then he nodded once politely, and went back to his corner table and his half-finished whiskey. Emma stood in the middle of the saloon floor with her tray in one hand, and her heart still going too fast, and thought, this is not over. She was right. It took Vernon McCrae 4 days to make his next move, and when it came, it was not the kind Emma had been watching for. She'd been watching for a direct confrontation, something she could see coming and prepare for. What she got instead was a piece of paper delivered by the county clerk on a Tuesday morning, informing her that due to outstanding debt and failure to meet the terms of the original loan agreement, all personal property held in the name of Hartley, which included the small house her mother had lived in, the only thing of value the woman had owned, was subject to seizure within 30 days. Emma read the paper 3 times. Then she sat down on the stool behind the bar because her legs had stopped cooperating. Gus came over and looked at the paper over her shoulder. He didn't say anything useful. He was not a man who said useful things. Emma folded the paper very carefully, the way you folded something important, and she put it in her apron pocket. Then she went back to work because the saloon didn't care about her problems, and neither did the glasses that needed washing. That night, when the saloon was thinning out toward midnight, Cole Harrison was still at his corner table. He'd been there most evenings since the incident with Vernon, which Emma had noticed and chosen not to address. He wasn't causing any trouble. He wasn't bothering anyone. He drank slowly and kept to himself and watched the room the way a man who had spent a long time watching rooms could not quite stop doing even when he wanted to. Emma brought him a fresh glass he hadn't asked for. He looked at it, then up at her. "On the house," she said. "Gus know about that." "Gus doesn't know about most things," she said. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. In 6 years of working in this saloon, she had sat down with a customer uninvited exactly twice, both times, because the situation required it. "I need to ask you something." "All right," he said. "Vernon McCrae is going to take my mother's house," she said. "He has a paper that says I owe him $400 and the interest on $400 for 30 years. He's moving to collect." Cole said nothing. He waited. "The paper is wrong," Emma said. "I know it's wrong. The loan was never documented properly. There are no witnesses to it. The signature on it isn't even my father's real signature. I know my father's handwriting. I have his letters. I can prove it." She put her hands flat on the table. "What I can't do is prove it by myself. I can't hire a lawyer. I can't fight Vernon McCrae in his own county with his own judge. But if I had someone to help me get the documentation to the right people, to the territorial judge in Mill Haven before Vernon can stop it, he'll try to stop it," Cole said. "Yes," Emma said. "Which is why I need someone who knows how to deal with men who try to stop things." Cole turned his glass slowly on the table. He was quiet for long enough that Emma started to regret saying anything. Then he said, "Show me the paper." She pulled it from her apron pocket and unfolded it and laid it on the table between them. He looked at it. He read it carefully, which she had not expected. She'd expected him to look at it the way men often looked at documents, with a kind of confident blankness, assuming the meaning without reading the actual words. But Cole read it line by line, and when he was done, he looked at the signature at the bottom. "You said you have your father's letters," he said. "At the house," she said. "A box of them. He wrote to my mother almost every week before he left. Same handwriting every time." "Then you have evidence," Cole said. "Evidence doesn't do much good when the judge is bought," Emma said. "The territorial judge in Mill Haven isn't bought," Cole said. "He's Judge Alderman. I know him. He ran 3 county sheriffs out of their offices last spring for taking McCrae's money." He looked up from the paper. "I was there when he did it." Emma stared at him. "You were there?" "I brought him one of the sheriffs," Cole said, "in chains." He said it without particular pride, just as a fact that was relevant to the conversation. Emma felt something shift in her chest. Not hope exactly, she had learned to be careful about hope, stability of hope, which was a different and more manageable thing. "Why would you help me?" she said. Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the glass on the table and turned it once more. "My wife's family had a situation like this," he said. "Different state, different man, same basic arrangement. Man with money and a piece of paper and a bought judge." He stopped. Emma waited. "Didn't end well for them," he said. It was the most he'd said at once, since she'd met him, and she could see what it cost him to say it the way the words came out carefully, each one carried out and set down like something breakable. "I'm sorry," she said. He nodded once. "What do we do?" Emma said. "You get the letters," he said, "tonight before Vernon can send someone to take them. We get the documentation together, and in the morning we ride for Millhaven." "That's 2 days' ride," Emma said. "It is," he said. "Vernon's men will follow us." "Yes," he said. "They will." He said it the same way he said everything, without alarm, without posturing, as a simple fact of the situation that he had already accounted for. And for reasons she couldn't entirely explain, that steadiness was more reassuring than any amount of confident reassurance would have been. He was not telling her it would be fine. He was telling her he already knew what was coming, and had decided to go anyway. Emma stood up from the table. She squared her shoulders. "I'll get the letters," she said. "Meet me at the livery in an hour," he said. Emma looked at him, this quiet, dust-worn man, with his careful eyes and his devastating draw, and whatever grief was living in his chest behind that flat, steady voice, and she made a decision. "All right, Mr. Harrison," she said. "Cole," he said. "All right," she said. "Cole." She untied her apron and walked through the saloon and out the back door into the summer night, which was still warm and dry and smelled like the prairie beyond town, like grass and dust and distance. She walked to her mother's small house 2 streets over, and she took the box of letters from the shelf where it had sat since the day her mother died, and she held it against her chest in the dark of that empty house. And she let herself feel for just a moment the full weight of everything she was leaving. Then she put the feeling away. She went to meet Cole Harrison at the livery. Outside, somewhere in the dark town of Dusty Springs, she heard a horse and the low sound of men's voices, and she knew, with the certainty that came from 3 years of watching Vernon McCrae, that they were already being watched. The night had not finished with her yet. The livery was dark when Emma got there, lit by a single lantern hanging from a post near the entrance. Cole was already saddled up a gray roan that stood quiet and steady, the kind of horse that didn't spook easy. He had a second horse ready beside it, a chestnut mare that Hank Briggs, the livery owner, was holding by the bridle, with the expression of a man who had been woken up from sleep and was choosing not to ask questions about why. Emma had the box of letters tucked under one arm and a canvas bag over her shoulder with everything she owned that mattered. Her mother's silver brooch, a change of clothes, the small amount of cash she'd been saving for 2 years in a tin she kept buried under a floorboard. $43, every cent of it. Cole looked at the box and said nothing. He just took it from her, tied it into his saddlebag with efficient, practiced hands, and held the chestnut mare steady while Emma mounted. She'd ridden before, not often, not well, but enough. She got up without help, and she settled herself, and she did not look back at the dark shape of the saloon 2 streets over. "We ride quiet," Cole said. "No talking until we're past the edge of town." Hank Briggs looked at them both, scratched the back of his neck, and went back inside the livery without a word. Some men had the wisdom to know when they'd seen nothing. They rode out of Dusty Springs heading northeast, keeping to the alley behind the main street, and then cutting across open ground once they cleared the last building. The summer night was warm and starlit, the prairie stretching out in every direction, flat and enormous and indifferent. The grass whispered against the horse's legs. Emma could smell sage and dry earth and something faintly electric in the air, the way the plains smelled before a distant storm. They put a mile between themselves and town before Cole spoke. "They'll know by morning," he said. "Gus will keep quiet," Emma said. "Gus will keep quiet until someone asks him directly," Cole said. After that, Gus will tell them everything he knows and some things he doesn't. He glanced at her. Vernon's got a man named Deke. I know Deke, Emma said. Deke's good at tracking, better than he looks. Emma thought about Deke Harlan's small pale eyes. How much of a head start do we have? Enough, Cole said. If we ride through the night. He said it matter-of-factly the way he said everything, and Emma decided not to point out that she had worked a full shift before this, that her back was already aching, that she had never in her life ridden through the night. She adjusted her grip on the reins and kept pace. They rode in silence for a while, and the silence was not uncomfortable. It was the kind that comes between people who are both thinking hard about the same problem and have the good sense not to fill the air with noise just to fill it. Emma was thinking about the paper in Cole's saddlebag, the one that called itself a debt. She was thinking about the signature at the bottom, the one that was almost her father's handwriting, but not quite the loop on the J, just slightly too open, the way the T crossed too high. She had looked at that signature so many times in the past 3 years, holding it up to her father's letters, with a kind of desperate attention, trying to convince herself she was imagining things. She hadn't been imagining things. Cole, she said. Yeah. The signature on that paper. I've been looking at it for 3 years. My father's letters are in that bag, if you look at them side by side. I already know, he said. She looked at him. You know it's forged. I know enough to recognize when a man's written his name under pressure versus when he's written it natural, Cole said. Learned that reading wanted posters for 12 years. Man signs his name forced under duress, or not at all. There's always something off in the wrist pressure. He looked straight ahead. That signature was copied. Carefully, but copied. Emma felt something hot and sharp move through her chest. Anger, yes, but also something else. The particular relief of being believed about something you'd known for years and hadn't been able to prove. He forged it, she said. Most likely, Cole said. And the territorial judge has seen enough of Vernon McCrae's paperwork to know what to look for. Will he look? If I ask him to, Cole said. Yes. He said it simply without arrogance, and Emma believed him in a way she couldn't entirely account for. There was something about the way this man made statements. Not promises, not reassurances, but plain statements of what he intended to do that made them feel like the most solid thing she'd heard in a long time. They rode for another hour before Cole held up a hand. Emma pulled the mare up short. She listened. Hoofbeats. Not close, but not far enough. How many? She said, keeping her voice low. Cole was already turning the roan, moving off the trail into the taller grass. 2, he said. Maybe 3. Move. She moved. They pushed off the trail and into the grass, the horses pressing through it with a sound like heavy fabric tearing, and Emma crouched low over the mare's neck, the way Cole was riding the roan, making herself small against the animal's back. The grass closed around them summer dry and shoulder high, and for 30 seconds Emma held her breath so hard her chest hurt. 3 riders went past on the trail. Fast. Heading northeast. Vernon's men. Not Deke would have ridden quieter. These were the rougher kind, the kind Vernon sent to make a point before he sent Deke to finish it. Emma waited until they were gone. Then she breathed. They're not trackers, Cole said quietly. They're meant to cut us off at Ridgeway Crossing. It's where most people heading to Millhaven would cross the river. Where do we cross? Emma said. 3 miles north of Ridgeway, Cole said. Different ford. Shallower this time of year, harder to find if you don't know it. He looked at her. I know it. Of course you do, Emma said, and something in her voice came out dry enough that Cole looked at her again, and this time something moved at the corner of his mouth that might, under different circumstances, have become a smile. They rode north. The crossing, Cole knew, was exactly as he'd described it, shallow and narrow and invisible, unless you were looking for a particular dead cottonwood on the bank and a pattern of stones in the water that caught the moonlight at just the right angle. The horses went through without complaint. Emma got her boots wet. She didn't say anything about it. On the other side, Cole stopped and listened for a long time. Then he said, We stop here till first light. Running horses in the dark on unfamiliar ground is how you lose them. Emma climbed down from the mare, with her considerably less cooperative than she would have preferred. She found a patch of ground that was more grass than rock, and sat down, and Cole unsaddled both horses with the efficient, quiet movements of someone who had done this in the dark more times than he could count. He brought her something from his saddlebag. Dried beef and a piece of cornbread that was harder than it had probably started. She ate it without complaint because she was genuinely hungry, and because complaining was a luxury she'd stopped allowing herself years ago. "Tell me about the judge," she said. Cole sat across from her, the saddlebags between them. "Alderman's been territorial judge for 6 years. Before that, he was a circuit judge in Kansas. He's 71 years old. He's got a bad hip, and he has the lowest tolerance for crooked paperwork of any man I've ever encountered." He paused. "I brought him the McCullough case in '71. Cattle rancher, had been forging land grants from retired soldiers who'd never received them. Alderman took one look at the documentation, had the man in custody within a week, and personally wrote a 100-page opinion on document fraud in the territory that's been used as precedent in 4 other cases since." Cole looked at her. "Your situation is not the first of its kind, Emma. Not by a long shot." "It felt like it was," Emma said. "It always does," Cole said. He said it quietly, without condescension, and Emma understood that he was not dismissing the loneliness of it, but acknowledging it. She turned the piece of cornbread in her hands. "You said your wife's family had something like this happen." Cole was quiet for a moment. A horse shifted. Somewhere in the grass, something small moved. "Her father lost his farm," Cole said. "Took him 4 years. The man who took it had a better lawyer and a friendlier judge and about 600 acres of reason to make sure the case went his way." He stopped. "We tried to fight it. We didn't have what you have. We didn't have the letters." "I'm sorry," Emma said again, because she meant it again. "Rebecca," Cole said. "My wife's name was Rebecca." He said it the way you said a word you hadn't spoken out loud in a long time, carefully, like testing whether it still held its shape. "She died 3 years ago. Fever. My daughter was 4. Another pause. "She didn't make it either." The night was very quiet. Emma didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. She had learned early that some griefs were not improved by words. So she just sat with it, with the weight of what he'd told her, and let it be as heavy as it was. After a while, Cole said, "You should sleep. We ride at first light." "What about you?" "I'll watch," he said. "You can't?" "I'll watch," he said again. Not sharply, just finally. Emma lay down on the hard summer ground with her canvas bag under her head and looked up at more stars than she'd seen in a long time, because Dusty Springs had enough lamplight at night to dull the sky, and out here there was nothing between her and the full width of it. She thought she wouldn't sleep. She was wrong. Exhaustion took her under faster than thought. She woke to gray light and Cole's hand on her shoulder, one firm touch, immediate withdrawal. "Time," he said. She sat up. Every muscle in her body informed her that she had slept on the ground after a night of riding, but she was alive, and they were still alone at the crossing, and that was what mattered. They were saddled and moving before the sun broke the horizon. The second day was harder and more honest than the first. The heat came up fast as the sun climbed and the terrain changed from flat prairie to rocky broken ground, the kind that made horses careful and riders sore. Emma's thighs were burning by mid-morning, and she said nothing about it. Cole set a pace that was quick but not punishing, and he watched their back trail at regular intervals, without making a production of it, just turning in the saddle and looking and then facing forward again. Around noon he pulled up. "Rider," he said. Emma looked back. The land behind them was open enough that she could see a long distance, and what she saw was one rider moving fast, cutting across the terrain at an angle that was not the angle of someone who didn't know exactly where they were going. "Deke," Cole said. Emma felt her stomach drop. "He found our crossing. He found our tracks on the other side of it," Cole said. "Deke's good." He was watching the rider with the focused, evaluating look she was beginning to recognize. "But he's alone." Is that better or worse? Depends on what he's planning, Cole said. Deke alone doesn't want to fight. Deke alone wants to follow, which means the others are somewhere else. Emma thought about the 3 riders who'd gone past them on the trail the night before. Ridgeway Crossing, she said. The others are at Ridgeway. Deke found our trail and now he's going to lead them to us, Cole said. Yes. He made a decision in about 4 seconds. We push hard. Millhaven is 8 hours at this pace, 4 if we push. The horses can handle 4 hours of hard riding, he said. I wouldn't push them if they couldn't. He looked at her. Can you handle it? Emma straightened in the saddle. Everything from her waist down was screaming. Yes, she said. They pushed. What followed was the longest 4 hours Emma had experienced since her mother's last night. Cole rode like he'd been born on horseback, which she suspected was close to the truth, easy and low and entirely in communication with the roan, without appearing to do much at all. Emma rode hard and fierce and considerably less gracefully, but she stayed on and she kept up. And when Cole glanced back at her at the end of the first hour, with something questioning in his look, she set her jaw and shook her head, and he faced forward again. They stopped twice briefly, briefly, to water the horses at creek crossings that Cole seemed to know by memory. Each time Emma looked back and saw Deke's figure smaller, but still they're still moving. He's not gaining, she said at the second stop. He won't, Cole said. But he's not losing ground either. He cupped water for the roan with his hat. We just need to reach town. Why town? Because Deke Harlan won't draw on me in front of witnesses in a town with a law office, Cole said. He's not stupid. He does Vernon's dirty work in places where there aren't witnesses or where the witnesses are paid to be blind. He settled the hat back on his head. Millhaven has a marshal who isn't bought. Alderman made sure of it last year. Emma looked at him. You know a lot about this part of the territory. I've worked this part of the territory, he said, for a long time. Do you have enemies here? He considered the question with complete seriousness. Some, he said, but fewer than Vernon. They mounted and rode. The moment Millhaven came into sight, a proper town larger than Dusty Springs, with a church steeple and what looked like an actual hotel. Emma felt something give way in her chest. Not relief, not entirely. More like the first loosening of something that had been wound tight for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like not to have it there. Cole did not slow down when they hit the edge of town. He pushed straight through to the main street at a pace that made people step back and pulled up in front of a square building with Marshal's office, painted in clean black letters above the door. He was off his horse before it stopped moving. Emma got down more slowly, considerably less athletically, and stood on legs that were considering refusing to cooperate. Cole went to the door and knocked twice hard. The door opened. A man looked out younger than Emma expected, maybe 30, with a marshal's badge and watchful eyes. Harrison, the marshal said. Briggs, Cole said. I need the judge. Briggs looked at Emma. He looked at the trail dust on both of them. He looked over their shoulders at the edge of town, where a single rider had appeared and stopped watching from a distance. The judge is at supper, Briggs said. It'll keep, Cole said. Put us inside and send word to Judge Alderman that Cole Harrison is here with a fraud case and the original documentation. He pulled the canvas saddlebag off his shoulder. And tell him it's Vernon McCrae's signature on the forgery. Briggs went very still. Vernon McCrae, he said. Yes, Cole said. Briggs looked at them both again, and then he opened the door wider and stepped back. Come in, he said. I'll send the boy for the judge. They went inside. The door closed. The single rider at the edge of Millhaven's main street sat his horse for a long moment, not moving, not advancing. Emma stood in the middle of the marshal's office, with her legs aching and her heart hammering, and the box of her father's letters clutched against her chest, and she thought, we made it. Then she heard it hoofbeats more than one coming in from the south end of town, coming fast. The 3 riders from Ridgeway Crossing. They'd been sent ahead. They'd been waiting. Briggs heard it too. He went to the window and looked, and something changed in his face. "Harrison," he said. Cole was already at the window. "4 of them," Briggs said. "Armed." "I see that," Cole said. Emma looked at the saddlebag on the table. The box of letters inside it. The forged signature that was the only thing standing between her mother's house and Vernon McCrae's possession. 3 years of careful waiting, and 1 night of hard riding, and they were 40 feet from the judge's courthouse, with Vernon's men between them and every exit. She looked at Cole. "We're not giving up that bag," she said. Cole looked at her. Something moved in his expression, not surprise exactly, but recognition, like he was seeing something he'd been watching take shape for 2 days. "No," he said. "We're not." He checked the Colt, set it back in its holster, looked at Briggs. "You've got jurisdiction in this town," Cole said. "Those men ride in armed and looking to interfere with witnesses in a fraud case in front of a federal judge. What happens?" Briggs straightened. The watchful look in his eyes sharpened into something harder. "They'd be interfering with federal proceedings," he said. "That's what I thought," Cole said. "I've got 2 deputies," Briggs said. "Get them," Cole said. Outside, the hoofbeats stopped. Emma heard voices low, deliberate, the sound of men arranging themselves for something. She crossed to the window and looked, and what she saw was 4 of Vernon McCrae's men fanned out in the street, blocking the path to the courthouse, blocking the path back to the livery, blocking every clear line of movement. And in the middle of them, just arrived, climbing off his horse, with the deliberate, self-assured movement of a man who had never once been on the wrong side of an outcome, Vernon McCrae himself. Emma went cold. He'd ridden through the night. He'd pushed harder than she'd thought him capable of, driven by something beyond money. Something that looked from here like the particular fury of a man who had been refused by someone he'd decided had no right to refuse him. He stood in the street, and he looked directly at the window where Emma stood, and he smiled, not with warmth, with certainty, the smile of a man who believed he had already won and was simply waiting for the formality of it to play out. Emma stepped back from the window. She looked at Cole. Cole looked at the door. He said, "Stay behind me." "No," Emma said. He looked at her. "Those letters are my father's," she said. "That documentation is mine. This is my fight." She picked up the saddlebag. The box of letters was inside. The forged signature was inside. 3 years of her life, and her mother's life, and everything that connected her to the truth of what had been done to her family was inside. She put the strap over her shoulder. "I'll walk behind you," she said. "But I'm walking." Cole held her gaze for a moment. Then he turned to the door and opened it, and Marshal Briggs was right beside him, with his hand at his holster, and 2 deputies were coming around from the side street. And Emma Hartley walked out into the summer afternoon heat of Millhaven's main street with her father's letters on her shoulder, and met Vernon McCrae's eyes across 40 feet of open ground. She did not look away. Neither did he. And somewhere behind them, a door opened, and slow, deliberate footsteps came down the courthouse stairs. The sound of a man with a bad hip, and 71 years, and no patience left for men who forged their way to power. Judge Alderman. Had not it turned out finished his supper after all? Judge Alderman was not an impressive-looking man at first glance. He was short, thick through the middle, moving with the hitching gait of someone whose hip had been arguing with him for years. His white hair was flattened on one side, from where he'd been sitting against a chair. His coat was unbuttoned. He had a napkin still tucked into his collar from supper. But when he came down those courthouse steps and looked at the scene in front of him, Vernon McCrae, with 4 armed men fanned out across the main street. Marshal Briggs with his hand at his holster. Cole Harrison standing in the doorway of the marshal's office, and Emma Hartley beside him, with a saddlebag on her shoulder. His eyes moved across all of it with the quick cataloging intelligence of a man who had been reading situations for 50 years. He pulled the napkin from his collar, folded it, put it in his coat pocket. "Mr. McCrae," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the way certain voices did through the kind of authority that had nothing to do with volume. You want to tell me what you're doing in my town, with 4 armed men blocking a public street? Vernon turned. The smile he'd had on his face watching Emma through the window was gone. In its place was the carefully managed pleasantness he wore for judges and ministers, and anyone else he couldn't simply buy. Judge Alderman, he said, this is a private matter, a debt collection. Nothing that needs to take up your evening. Alderman said. He came down the last step and stopped looking at Vernon's men. Private matter requiring 4 guns. Interesting accounting. He looked at Cole. Harrison, what have you got? Forgery, Cole said. Debt fraud. 30-year scheme against a single family. He nodded toward Emma. This is Emma Hartley, the debtor of record. She has the original loan document and her father's correspondence proving the signature was forged. Alderman looked at Emma. His eyes were pale blue and extremely direct. Is that right, Miss Hartley? Yes, sir, Emma said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Then come inside, Alderman said. Both of you. He turned his back on Vernon McCrae with the unhurried ease of a man who did not consider him a physical threat, which either meant he was very confident in Marshal Briggs, or he had lived long enough to stop being afraid of men like Vernon, and had found it improved his digestion considerably. Vernon took 1 step forward. Judge, Mr. McCrae, Alderman said, not turning around. You and your men will wait in the street. If any of you draws a weapon, Marshal Briggs will arrest you for threatening a federal proceeding. If any of you leaves town, I'll issue a warrant before morning. He paused on the step. If you'd like to join us inside, you're welcome to do that too. But you'll leave the guns with Briggs's deputies, and you'll sit down and be quiet while I look at the documents. He finally looked back over his shoulder. Your choice. Vernon stood very still for a long moment. The men around him waited. Deke Harlan had materialized at the edge of the group, now having come in from the far end of the street, and he was watching Cole with his pale eyes in the way of a man doing careful mathematics. I'll come inside, Vernon said. Emma's grip on the saddlebag tightened. She hadn't expected that. She'd expected him to bluster and threaten from the street, not walk in and sit down. That was the move of a man who believed he could win the argument, even with the documents on the table, and the realization of it settled in her stomach like cold water. He knew something she didn't, or he thought he did. They went inside. Alderman's office was attached to the courthouse, a cluttered working space with maps on the walls and more paper stacked in more places than seemed structurally advisable. He cleared a section of the main table without ceremony, pushing 2 stacks of files to the side, and held out his hand. Emma set the saddlebag on the table. She reached inside and took out the box. She opened it and laid her father's letters out, 12 of them, spanning 4 years, all in the same hand. The same slant, the same particular way her father had of crossing his T's low and looping his capital B. Then she took the loan document from Cole and laid it beside them. Alderman sat down. He put on a pair of spectacles. He looked. The room was very quiet. Vernon stood to one side with his arms crossed. Cole stood near the door. Marshal Briggs was at the window, watching the men outside. Emma stood at the table and watched Alderman's face trying to read it, and couldn't. Alderman picked up the loan document. He picked up one of the letters. He held them at the same angle, looking back and forth. A full minute passed. Who wrote this document? Alderman said. My father supposedly signed it, Emma said. But that's not his signature. Who prepared it? Alderman said. He was looking at Vernon. My attorney at the time, Vernon said. Man named Caldwell. He's no longer in practice. Convenient, Alderman said. He moved to Oregon, Vernon said. Nothing convenient about it. Alderman set both documents down. He picked up a second letter, then a third, lining them up. He studied them with the focused patience of a man who was not going to be rushed by the tension in the room, or by Vernon McCrae's careful breathing, or by anything else. Then he said, the loan document was dated April 1861. That's correct, Vernon said. Miss Hartley, Alderman said. The letters from your father. Do any of them mention this loan? Emma had read every one of those letters so many times she could have recited them. No, sir, she said. Not one. In 12 letters spanning from 1859 to 1863, Alderman said. Yes, sir. Alderman looked at Vernon. A man takes out a $400 loan in April of 1860 and does not mention it in any correspondence with his wife in the following 2 years. Not every man tells his wife everything, Vernon said. No, Alderman agreed mildly. But most men mention $400. He took off his spectacles. Mr. McCrae, I'm going to need you to sit down. I'm fine standing. It wasn't a suggestion, Alderman said. Vernon sat down. The pleasantness on his face had thinned to something almost transparent. Underneath it, Emma could see the edges of the other thing, the cold, flat anger she'd seen in the saloon when she'd said no. Alderman put his spectacles back on and picked up the loan document again. He turned it over. He looked at the back. Then he put it down very carefully, the way you put down something that you now understood the full weight of, and he looked at Emma. Miss Hartley, he said, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer it exactly. Did your father ever, to your knowledge, borrow money from Vernon McCrae? Not to my knowledge, Emma said. Did your mother ever acknowledge this debt as legitimate? She paid it, Emma said, because she was told she had to, not because she believed it was real. She told me before she died that she'd never known my father to do business with Vernon McCrae. Not once. Alderman nodded slowly. Your Honor, Vernon said, and his voice had shifted a gear, dropping something more careful coming through. I understand how this looks, but I want to be clear I have additional documentation. Records from my own ledgers showing the cash disbursement. Bank records showing a withdrawal on the date in question. Cole, who had been silent since they came inside, said, Bank records showing a withdrawal can show a man withdrew money. They can't show who he gave it to. Vernon looked at him. A ledger entry in your own hand, Cole continued. Written by you, recorded by you, is not corroborating evidence. It's your account of events. One man's account. He looked at Alderman. The letters, on the other hand, are 30-year-old documents. Ink consistent with the period. Paper stock from the late 1850s. Handwriting that's been consistent across 12 specimens. Alderman was looking at Cole with an expression that suggested he was enjoying the precision of this more than he wanted to show. Vernon stood up. You brought a bounty hunter to argue your case in front of a federal judge. He's making observations, Emma said, about documents, accurate ones. Miss Hartley. Vernon turned to her, and now the pleasantness was entirely gone, and what came through in its place was so cold and so directed that Emma felt it physically like a drop in temperature. You are a 22-year-old girl who works in a saloon. You have $43 to your name. He paused, watching her face, and Emma understood with a sick lurch that he knew exactly how much was in that tin because someone had been watching her for a long time. And a box of old letters. You think that's enough to take on 30 years of established debt, and my attorney, and my documentation, and my bank records? Yes, Emma said. The word came out before she had fully decided to say it, and when it was in the air, she found she meant it completely. She looked at Vernon McCrae, this man who had taken her father's signature, and her mother's fear, and 3 years of her life, and she felt something settle in her chest, solid and final, the way foundations settled. I think it's exactly enough, she said, because the truth doesn't need more than evidence. It just needs someone willing to look at it. Silence. Then Alderman said very quietly, Sit down, Mr. McCrae. Vernon didn't move. I will not ask again, Alderman said. Vernon sat. Alderman looked at Emma. You said you can prove the signature is forged. Side by side, yes, Emma said. She pointed to the letters and then to the document. The capital H in Hartley. In every letter, my father's H opens wide at the top 2 distinct peaks. In the loan document, it's narrowed, closed. The person who copied it pressed too hard on the second stroke. She pointed again. The number 4 in the amount. My father always wrote his 4s open at the top, never closed. The one in this document is closed. Whoever copied his writing had seen it, but hadn't lived with it. Alderman put his spectacles on and looked where she was pointing. The room waited. Emma heard Vernon shift in his chair. She heard Cole breathe. Outside, somewhere in the street, one of the horses stamped. "Well," Alderman said at last. He took off his spectacles again. He set them on the table. He rubbed his eyes with the heels of both hands, the gesture of a man who had been doing a difficult job for a very long time, and was not surprised by what the job kept showing him, but was tired of it nevertheless. He looked at Vernon. "Mr. McCrae," he said, "I've been a judge in this territory for 6 years, before that Kansas 8 years, before that Missouri 11. He folded his hands on the table. "I have seen a great deal of paper cross this table, deeds, grants, contracts, loan agreements, some of them legitimate, some of them not." He tapped the loan document with one finger. "This one is not." Vernon's voice came out quiet and controlled. "You can't make that determination from a 5-minute review. I'm not making a final determination tonight," Alderman said. "Tonight I'm making a preliminary finding that warrants further investigation, which means I'm ordering a hold on any collection action related to this document pending full forensic review." He looked at Briggs. "Marshal, I'll need an order drawn up." Briggs moved to the desk in the corner and reached for paper. Vernon stood up. This time no one told him to sit down. He stood up and he looked at Emma, and the look on his face was the one she'd been afraid of for 3 years. The one that had lived in the back of her mind every time she'd made a payment, and every time she'd looked at that forged signature, and every time she'd thought about fighting and talked herself out of it. It was the look of a man who had decided that if he could not have the thing he wanted through legal means, the legal means were simply a delay. "This isn't finished," he said, not to Alderman, to Emma. "It will be," Emma said. Vernon walked out. The door closed behind him with a controlled, deliberate click that was somehow more frightening than a slam. Alderman looked at Cole. "Your read?" "He's not done," Cole said. "He didn't ride through the night for a piece of property. He rode through the night because she said no." Alderman nodded slowly as though this confirmed something he'd already concluded. He looked at Emma. "Miss Hartley, I'm going to need you to stay in Millhaven until the review is complete. That's 3 days minimum, possibly 5. "All right," Emma said. "You'll stay at the hotel. I'll have Briggs put a deputy on the building." He stood slowly with the careful movement of the bad hip. "You did the right thing coming here, and you did it right, documented, verifiable in front of a witness." He looked at the letters on his table. "Your father would have been glad of that box." Emma had not expected that. She felt something tighten in her throat, sudden and sharp, and she pressed it back down. "Thank you," she said. "Your Honor." Alderman nodded. He began gathering the documents carefully. The letters first. The loan documents separately, keeping them in the order Emma had laid them out. "Harrison," he said without looking up. "You staying?" "For now," Cole said. "Good." Alderman looked at him over the top of the documents. "Because I have a feeling Mr. McCrae is going to do something stupid before morning, and I'd rather have you between him and my witness than explaining to the territorial governor why I let a man intimidate a fraud victim in my jurisdiction." He went through the inner door to the courthouse, moving with his hitching step, the documents under his arm, and the door closed softly behind him. Emma and Cole were alone in the office. Briggs had gone outside, the scratch of his pen on the order paper drifting in from the other room. Emma set the saddlebag down on the table. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, she recognized the difference now, but from the release of 3 years of held-back pressure, the way a rope goes slack all at once after it's been cut. Her whole body didn't know what to do with not being braced for the next blow. Cole saw it. He said nothing. He went to the side table where Briggs kept a pitcher of water and 2 tin cups, and he poured one and set it in front of her. She drank it, sat down. After a moment, he sat down across from her. Not close, just present. "He meant what he said," Emma said. "It isn't finished." "No," Cole agreed. "He'll come tonight," she said. "Or his men will." "Probably," Cole said. "And Deke's out there." "Deke's patient," Cole said. "That's what makes him dangerous. He'll wait for a moment when there are fewer witnesses. Emma looked at the door. What do we do? We don't give him a moment with fewer witnesses, Cole said. You stay inside. Briggs keeps his deputy outside. I stay close. You can't forever, Emma said. No, he said. But I can stay awake tonight. Emma looked at him. This man who had ridden through a summer night to cross a river at a ford, no one else knew who had read a forged signature in 30 seconds and known it for what it was, who had sat up in the dark by a creek and kept watch while she slept, and never once made her feel the debt of it. Why are you doing this? She said. Cole looked at the tin cup. He turned it in his hands the way he'd turned his glass in the saloon, that same slow, deliberate movement. I told you why, he said. You told me about Rebecca, Emma said. About her family's farm? But that's... She stopped. That's a reason to understand. It's not a reason to ride 2 days and face down Vernon McCrae and sit outside a hotel room in a strange town. Cole was quiet for a moment. When I walked into that saloon, he said, and I saw you standing there with your hand on that knife, not pulling it, just holding it, not because you were scared, but because you were making a choice about what kind of person you were going to be. He stopped, started again. Rebecca would have done the same thing, he said. Exactly the same thing. The quiet in the room was different from the quiet by the creek. That had been the quiet of open space and exhaustion. This was smaller and more careful. I'm not her, Emma said gently. I know that, Cole said. He looked up. I know exactly who you are, Miss Hartley. I've been watching you make good decisions under pressure for 2 days. He paused. It's not about Rebecca, not entirely. Another pause, and this one cost him something. She could see it. You reminded me that some things are worth riding toward instead of away from. It's been a while since I remembered that. Emma didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it smaller. Outside, the sound of the street carried in muffled voices a horse. Someone laughing, somewhere that was not connected to any of this. The ordinary sound of a town that had no idea what was sitting inside the marshal's office. Then Briggs came back in his deputy order in hand, and the moment broke apart into the practical, into signing and arrangements, and which room at the hotel, and what time the deputy changed shifts, and Emma was grateful for it because she needed something to do with her hands. It was near 9 o'clock when she finally walked to the hotel, Cole 2 paces behind her, Briggs's deputy, falling in on the other side. The summer dark was warm and close, the sky overhead still holding the last faint bruise of sunset at the western edge. She stopped at the hotel door. Cole, she said. He stopped. Thank you, she said. And I don't just mean for today. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded once, in the way he nodded when words were not the point. Emma went inside. She was 3 steps up the stairs when she heard a sound from the back of the building, low and controlled, the sound of a door that someone very experienced at moving quietly had not quite managed to close without noise. She stopped. The deputy outside hadn't heard it. He was at the front. She turned around slowly and looked toward the back hallway, and what she saw at the end of it made the air go out of her lungs. Deke Harlan standing perfectly still in the shadows, looking directly at her, his hand at his side, his pale eyes catching the lamplight. He had been in the hotel already. He had come in before they arrived, before the deputy was posted, before any of this was arranged. He had been waiting. Emma did not scream. She did not run. She stood on the 3rd step of the hotel staircase and looked at Deke Harlan, and she thought about the saddlebag in her hand, which now held only the letters Alderman had kept, the loan document, and she thought about what Deke had come for and what Vernon had sent him to do. And she thought about the 3 years she had been afraid of men like this, and what it had cost her, and what she was not willing to let it cost her any more. She opened her mouth, and she screamed Cole's name with everything she had. Cole was through the hotel door before the echo of Emma's voice had finished moving through the building. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't call out. He came in fast and low, the Colt already in his hand, and his eyes found Deke Harlan at the end of the hallway. In the same instant, Deke's hand moved toward his hip. "Don't," Cole said. The word landed like a dropped stone. Flat. Absolute. Deke stopped. He was good. Emma had underestimated how good standing there on the staircase, watching the two men look at each other across the length of that hallway. Deke hadn't drawn because he'd read the room in a single second and calculated that Cole Harrison's gun was already out and already aimed, and that drawing against a man in that position was not a survivable decision. That kind of calculation made that fast was not the reflex of a hired hand. That was the reflex of a professional, which meant Deke was more dangerous than Vernon's other men, and more dangerous than he'd looked leaning against that saloon wall 3 nights ago. "Hands," Cole said. Deke raised them, slow, deliberate, the gesture of a man complying while making absolutely clear that he was choosing to comply. The deputy came through the front door at a run, hand at his holster, stopping short when he saw the scene in the hallway. Behind him, 2 other men pushed in guests Emma realized who'd heard her scream and come out of their rooms, standing at the top of the stairs looking down. "They're a back door to this building," Cole said to the deputy, not taking his eyes off Deke. "Yes, sir. Off the kitchen." "He came through it," Cole said. "Get Briggs." The deputy went back out at a run. Cole crossed the hallway in 8 steps, keeping the Colt level, and took Deke's gun from its holster with his free hand. He took a second knife from Deke's boot. He stepped back. "Sit down," he said. "On the floor." Deke sat. He looked up at Cole with those pale, patient eyes. "You know this doesn't change anything," he said. "It changes tonight," Cole said. "Tonight's what I'm working on." Emma came down the stairs. Her heart was still hammering, but her hands had steadied, and she stood beside Cole and looked at Deke Harlan sitting on the hotel floor with his hands visible, and thought 3 nights ago I would have screamed before he came through the door and been too afraid to move after. Something had shifted in her without her noticing the exact moment of it. "What did Vernon send you for?" she said. Deke looked at her. "I don't know what you mean." "The letters," she said. "He sent you for the letters. The loan document is already with Alderman, he knows that. But the letters are the corroborating evidence, and without them, the forgery case is thinner." She looked at the saddlebag in her hand. "That's what you were waiting for?" Deke said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. "Tell me something," Emma said. She crouched down so she was at eye level with him, which was a thing she would not have done 3 days ago. But she'd ridden 2 days and faced Vernon McCrae in a street and said her piece to a federal judge, and she was finished being the height that men expected her to be. "How many families has he done this to? Not me, not my mother, before us. How many?" Deke's pale eyes shifted, just slightly. "More than one," Emma said. "I know it's more than one because a man doesn't develop a system this clean on his first try. The forged document, the county clerk, the bought judge, that's a system that's been refined." She held his gaze. "You've watched him do it before." "I work for Mr. McCrae," Deke said. "I don't keep his books." "No," Emma said. "You just make sure the people who could upset them don't get the chance." She stood back up. "Alderman will want to talk to you." Deke looked at Cole. "You gonna let her speak for you, Harrison?" "She's doing fine," Cole said. Briggs came through the front door at a controlled run, took one look at Deke on the floor, and exhaled through his nose in the way of a man who had been anticipating exactly this and was not surprised but was still annoyed. He looked at Cole. "He draw on you." "Didn't get the chance," Cole said. "Breaking and entering a hotel," Briggs said. "Carrying concealed with intent." He looked at Deke. "Mr. Harlan, you've had a busy evening." He got Deke on his feet and walked him out, and the 2 guests at the top of the stairs went back to their rooms with the disappointed air of people who'd arrived after the most interesting part, and the hotel settled back into its night sounds. Cole looked at Emma. "You all right?" he said. "Yes," she said. And then, because it was true, and because she was tired of not saying true things out loud, "I wasn't afraid, I was angry." "Good," Cole said. "Angry's more useful." She almost smiled. "That sounds like something a man says who's been angry for a long time." Cole looked at her for a moment. "Fair point," he said. He checked the back door, found the latch compromise Deke had come through with a pick or a knife blade, Clean work, fast work, and wedged a chair under the handle. Then he came back to the foot of the stairs. "Go sleep," he said. "I'll be here." "You said that last night," Emma said. "And last night worked out," he said. She went upstairs. She did not sleep for a long time. She lay on the bed in the small hotel room and stared at the ceiling and listened to the building settle around her and thought about Deke's eyes when she'd asked him how many families. The shift in them. The almost imperceptible flinch of a man who knew the answer and had decided a long time ago to live with knowing it. She thought about all the families she didn't know about. All the mothers who'd paid debts that weren't real. All the fathers whose signatures had been borrowed without permission. All the houses and farms and small pieces of land that had passed into Vernon McCrae's possession through paper and patience and the reliable willingness of people to believe that legal documents meant legal truth. She felt the anger move through her like something alive. She would not be the last one if she lost this. But if she won, if Alderman found what she believed he would find, if the forgery was confirmed, if it went to territorial court, there would be a record, a precedent. Something that could not be unfiled or unbought. She fell asleep thinking about that. She woke to raised voices downstairs. The room was gray with early morning light, which meant she'd slept 3 or 4 hours, maybe 5. She was off the bed and at the door before she'd fully assembled consciousness, the saddlebag already in her hand, from some instinct that had developed somewhere in the last 2 days. She opened the door and listened. Cole's voice level. Briggs' voice controlled but tight, and a third voice she didn't recognize immediately, and then did one of Vernon's men, the one called Rook, who'd been at the saloon the first night and had stood up and walked out without a word after Deke was arrested. She'd underestimated Rook. Everyone had. She went to the top of the stairs and looked down. Rook was standing in the hotel entrance with his hat in his hands, which was not the posture of a man who'd come for a confrontation. He was young, she saw now in the morning light, younger than she'd placed him, maybe 25, with the kind of face that had started out open and was in the process of becoming something more careful. "I need to talk to someone," Rook was saying. "Not McCrae's someone. Someone on the other side of this." Cole looked at him. "You've got about 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't send you back out that door." "Because I know where the other documents are," Rook said. "The originals. The ones he used to make the copies." Silence. Emma came down the stairs. All 3 men looked at her. She looked at Rook. "What other documents?" she said. Rook turned his hat in his hands. He was nervous. Genuinely nervous, the kind that came from making a decision that couldn't be unmade. "McCrae keeps a strong box," he said. "In the ranch house. He doesn't let anyone in the room where it is not Deke, not his attorney, nobody. But I've been working that ranch for 4 years and—" He stopped. "A man notices things when he's around long enough." "What's in the box?" Emma said. "Papers," Rook said. "I've seen him with them twice. Taking them out, looking at them, putting them back. Once when he thought no one was around. He had letters, old ones, tied with string, and a sheet of paper beside them, and he was—" Rook stopped again, swallowed. He was practicing the signature. Emma heard Cole breathe. Just once, a long, controlled exhale. "He keeps the originals," Emma said. "The letters he uses as templates. He keeps them." "I think so," Rook said. "I can't prove it. But if someone were to go to that ranch with the right authority—" "A search order," Briggs said. He looked at Cole. "Alderman could issue one this morning." "On the basis of a ranch hand's testimony," Cole said. He was looking at Rook steadily. "You'd have to testify, formally, with your name on it." Rook's jaw tightened. "I know that." "Vernon will know it came from you," Cole said. "He's not a forgiving man." "No," Rook said. "He's not." He looked at Emma. "Last winter there was a family, widow woman south of here, name of Pruitt. 2 kids, farm her husband left her. McCrae had a document." He stopped. "She didn't have anyone like—" He gestured, meaning Emma, meaning Cole, meaning all of this, any of this. "She lost the farm in February. Kids are in the county home." The room was very quiet. Emma looked at this young man with his turned hat and his decision already made, and his fear sitting plainly on his face, and she thought about what it cost to do the right thing when you'd been on the wrong side of it for 4 years. It cost more than starting on the right side, because you had to carry the time you hadn't. "Thank you," she said. Rook looked at her. Something in his face shifted. Not relief exactly, but the slight easing of a weight that had been on him for a while. "Tell me about the strongbox," she said. "Everything you remember." They sat down, all 4 of them, in the small hotel sitting room, and Rook talked for 40 minutes. He talked about the strongbox's location, about the room it was kept in, about the 2 times he'd seen Vernon with the papers, and what the papers had looked like, and the size of the bundle of letters, and the particular way Vernon had held them carefully, the way you held something you needed to last. He talked about the ranch layout, the staff who was loyal to Vernon from conviction, and who was loyal because they needed the work. He talked about a ledger in the ranch office that listed payments received from sources that weren't cattle sales or land rents. Cole listened to all of it with the focused, systematic attention of a man building a map in his head. Briggs took notes. Emma asked 3 questions that sent Rook back through his memories, for more detailed questions about dates and paper color, and whether the letters he'd seen were written in one hand or multiple hands. "Multiple hands," Rook said. "Several different handwritings. All old papers. Not just her family." Emma had been right. The box held the templates for multiple forgeries. Multiple families. When Rook finished, Cole looked at Briggs. "That's enough for a search order," Briggs said. "It's enough for more than that," Cole said. "It's enough for Alderman to issue a warrant for McCrae's arrest pending the search." "He has to approve it," Briggs said. "Then let's go ask him," Cole said. He stood. He looked at Rook. "You stay here. Don't go outside." "McCrae will know by now that Deke didn't come back," Rook said. "He'll know something went wrong." "Yes," Cole said. "Which means we move fast." Emma was already standing. She had the saddlebag, and she had the letters, and she had 3 years of accumulated certainty that she was right, and she had a young man sitting across from her who had watched a widow lose her farm, and was trying late and imperfectly to do something about it. "Let's go," she said. Alderman was not pleased about being woken before his breakfast, but he was awake and dressed, and the displeasure faded inside of 60 seconds, as Briggs laid out Rook's testimony and Cole confirmed the corroborating details from the documents already in Alderman's possession. The judge sat behind his desk with his spectacles on and his hands flat on the table, and looked at Rook, who was sitting across from him, with the expression of a man at a crossroads who had already chosen his direction and was committed to walking it. "You understand what you're stating," Alderman said. "Yes, sir," Rook said. "You're stating that Vernon McCrae maintains in his possession original letters belonging to other parties which he uses to practice forging signatures for the purpose of creating fraudulent debt instruments." "Yes, sir. That's what I'm stating." Alderman was quiet for a moment. "You worked for this man for 4 years." "Yes, sir." "And you're coming forward now?" Rook was quiet for a moment. "There was a widow," he said. "Name of Pruitt. Her kids are in the county home." Alderman looked at him for a long time. Then he reached for his pen. He wrote for 7 minutes. Emma counted. He wrote steadily without hesitation, the scratch of the pen in the quiet room the most purposeful sound she'd heard in days. Then he signed it, set the pen down, looked at Briggs. "Arrest warrant for Vernon McCrae," he said. "Search order for the ranch property. Execute both simultaneously. I want the property searched before he can send anyone ahead to clear it." He looked at Cole. "Harrison, I'm authorizing you to ride with Briggs as a federal witness and consultant. You know that ranch layout now, and I don't have the manpower to spare for a blind search." Cole nodded. "Miss Hartley." Alderman looked at her. "You stay here." Emma opened her mouth. "You are the plaintiff in this matter," Alderman said, not unkindly, but with absolute finality. "If you are present at the arrest or the search, McCrae's attorney will argue contamination. You are more valuable here, safe intact, available to testify." He held her gaze. "You've done the hard part. You rode here. You put the documents in front of me. You found the corroborating witness. He nodded toward Rook. Now let the law do what you built it a road to do. Emma sat back. She hated it. She hated sitting still when things were moving. But she understood the logic of it clean and functional, and she understood that fighting it would cost what it had taken to build. All right, she said. Cole looked at her as he moved toward the door. He stopped. Lock the door of whatever room you're in, he said. Don't open it for anyone you don't know. I know, she said. I know you know, he said. I'm saying it anyway. How long? She said. 3 hours to the ranch, 3 hours back, plus whatever time the search takes. He looked at her steadily. Before dark. She nodded. He went. The room emptied Cole and Briggs and Rook and 2 deputies moving fast and deliberate, the sound of them organizing in the street outside horses and equipment and the low exchange of instructions. Emma sat in Alderman's office while the old judge went to find his breakfast at last, and she listened to the sounds of the search party leaving town, and then there was just the building quiet of a courthouse in the early morning. She sat with it. She thought about Vernon's face in the street last night, the certainty on it, the smile that said he had already won. She thought about him riding through the summer night pushing hard, not because the property mattered, but because she'd said no. She thought about the strongbox and the bundle of letters tied with string. Other people's letters, other people's handwriting, other people's proof of their lives kept in a locked room by a man who needed them to build the machinery of his control. She thought about the widow Pruitt. 2 kids. County home. She picked up her father's letters from the saddlebag. 12 of them worn soft at the folds from years of her mother's reading. Her father had not been a good man in every way he'd left, which was its own kind of failure, but his handwriting was his specific and real, his actual hand pressing the actual pen, and no one had the right to take that and use it for something he'd never done. She put them back, folded her hands, waited. 2 hours passed. The door of the courthouse opened. Emma was on her feet before she'd made the decision to stand. But it was not Cole. It was not Briggs. It was the young deputy who'd been left to watch the building, and his face was doing something complicated, and he said, Miss Hartley, there's a man outside asking to see you. Says his name is McCrae. Emma went very still. Vernon, she said. No, ma'am, the deputy said. Says his name is Douglas McCrae. Says he's Vernon's brother. Emma stared at him. Vernon had never, not once in 3 years, mentioned a brother. Neither had anyone else in Dusty Springs. She thought of every conversation she'd heard about the McCrae family, the ranch, the land, the empire Vernon had spent his life assembling, and a brother had never appeared in any of it. Where is he? She said. Outside, the deputy said. He came on foot. The deputy paused, searching for the word. He's not like Vernon. What does that mean? Emma said. He asked to see you politely, the deputy said, and he looks like he's been crying. Emma looked at the door. Then she looked at the window. Outside she could see the edge of the street, ordinary and quiet, completely unchanged from the morning. She thought about what Cole had said. Don't open it for anyone you don't know. But she also thought about a brother who had never been mentioned, about what a man hid when he hid a brother, about what might be in that hiding. Bring him in here, she said. Keep him where I can see the door. The deputy went out. Emma straightened. She put her father's letters back in the saddlebag. She stood at the side of Alderman's desk, not behind it. She wasn't hiding, and she waited. The man who came through the door was nothing like Vernon. He was shorter, thinner, with the same gray eyes, but in a face that wore them differently. Not with Vernon's cold calculation, but with something that looked like it had been through a significant amount of genuine weather. He was maybe 50. His coat was plain, his hat was off already, and he held it against his chest with both hands. His eyes found Emma's, and he stopped. Miss Hartley, he said. Mr. McCrae, she said. The other one. Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile, but close to it. Douglas, he said. I've been Douglas for most of my life. Vernon made sure nobody knew about it. Why? Emma said. Douglas looked at the chair. "May I?" She nodded. He sat. He turned the hat in his hands once, and the gesture was so much like the way Cole turned a glass that Emma felt a strange skip in her chest. "Vernon and I grew up together," Douglas said. "On a farm our father left us jointly. When I was 22, Vernon showed me a document. Said our father had signed the property entirely to him before he died, that my share was a mistake in the original deed, that it had been corrected." He paused. "I was young. I believed him. I left." Emma heard her own breathing. "He did it to his own brother," she said. "He did it to his own brother first," Douglas said, "before he perfected it." He looked up at her. "I've been in Colorado for 28 years. I came back because I heard through a man I know in Millhaven that someone was finally fighting Vernon in front of aldermen with documents. And He stopped. "I have papers too," he said. "I kept them. My father's real will, the original deed. The document Vernon showed me, which I recognized for what it was about 10 years later when I'd gotten enough distance to see it clearly." Emma sat down across from him. Not because her legs gave out, but because this required sitting. "You have the original will," she said. "I do," Douglas said. "I've carried it for 28 years because I never had enough courage to come back and use it." He looked at her directly. "You have more courage than I do, Miss Hartley. I'm not ashamed to say it. I watched you from outside the courthouse yesterday. I just arrived in town, and I watched you walk into that street with that bag on your shoulder, and I thought, if she can do it, I have no excuse anymore." Emma thought about all the things she wanted to say. She thought about how easy it was to admire courage in someone else and wait on your own. She thought about 28 years of a man carrying a document that could have changed things and not having anywhere to take it. She thought, we're none of us as alone in this as we think. "Alderman is going to want to see that will," she said. "I know," Douglas said. "That's why I'm here." Emma looked at the door. Cole was somewhere on the road to Vernon's ranch. Briggs was with him. The search was happening right now in the summer morning, in a room in a ranch house where a strongbox held 30 years of stolen letters. And here in this courthouse, while all of that was moving, the first piece had just arrived. The one that predated everything else. The one that showed not just what Vernon had done to Emma's family, but how he had learned to do it. On his brother. Emma looked at Douglas McCrae. "Show me the will," she said. Douglas McCrae's hands were steady when he reached into his coat and pulled out the document. That was the first thing Emma noticed. Not shaking. Not the trembling hands of a man who had been afraid for 28 years. Steady. Like he had made his peace with the decision before he walked through the door and was simply following through on something already finished inside him. The will was old. Anyone could see that at a glance the paper had gone the color of weak tea. The ink faded to brown at the edges, the fold lines soft and permanent from decades of being carried in the same position, inside the same coat. Douglas laid it flat on Alderman's desk, with the careful hands of someone who understood that old things required respect, and Emma leaned in and read it. The handwriting was nothing like Vernon's. It was a different generation, entirely rounder, more deliberate, the script of a man who had learned to write when writing was considered a serious skill worth acquiring. The name at the top was Thomas Elias McCrae. The date was March 1841. And the language was plain and without ambiguity. The property known as the McCrae Homestead, comprising 420 acres in the county of Hart, was to be divided equally between his two sons, Vernon James McCrae and Douglas Thomas McCrae, in the event of his death. Equal. Not entirely 2-1. Equal. Emma straightened. She looked at Douglas. "Vernon told you this didn't exist." "He told me the original had been lost," Douglas said. "That what I was seeing was a preliminary draft that had been superseded by a later document giving him full ownership. He showed me the later document. It looked real. I was 22. He paused. "I know how that sounds. It sounds like someone who was 22 and trusted his brother," Emma said. She thought about all the ages at which people were deceived by the people who should have protected them. 22 was not a shameful age for it. It was just an age. She picked up the will and carried it to the window where the morning light was cleaner, and she read it again, all of it, every line. Her mind went to the loan document, to her father's forged signature, to the bundle of letters Rook had described in Vernon's strongbox. She thought about the shape of what Vernon had built, not just a financial scheme, not just greed, but something more structural, a system of control built on paper and silence, and the reliable human tendency to believe documents meant truth. He'd started with his own brother. He'd taken the farm his father meant for both of them, and the method had worked so cleanly, had produced so little resistance, that he'd refined it and used it again, and again, and again for 30 years, until the county of Hart was substantially his, through instruments that were substantially lies. "I need to show this to Alderman," Emma said. "I know," Douglas said. "He's going to ask you to testify." "I know that too." Emma looked at him. "Vernon is going to know it came from you." "Yes," Douglas said. He was quiet for a moment. "He's my brother. I've been telling myself for 28 years that was a reason to stay out of it." He looked at his hat. "Mrs. Pruitt's children are in the county home. That's the reason I'm in it now." Emma left Douglas with the deputy and went to find Alderman, who was finishing his breakfast in a room off the back of the courthouse with the determined pace of a man who had learned not to let justice interrupt his eggs entirely. She put the will on the table beside his plate. He looked at it. He set down his fork. He read it. Then he looked up at Emma over his spectacles with an expression that contained several things at once: professional satisfaction, genuine anger, and something older and more tired underneath both of them. "The brother," he said. "Douglas McCrae," Emma said. "He's been in Colorado for 28 years. He kept the will." Alderman picked it up carefully. 19 years before your father's loan document was created," he said. "This is where he learned it." "Yes," Emma said. "And if you compare the language in this will to the language in the loan document, the particular way certain phrases are constructed, I think you'll find the same hand in both." Alderman looked at her. "You read law." "I read everything," Emma said. There wasn't much else to do in Dusty Springs on a slow night. Alderman set the will down. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and stood with the labored deliberateness of the bad hip, and he straightened his coat. "Bring the brother in," he said. "We'll take his statement before Harrison gets back." Douglas's statement took 45 minutes. He was precise, which surprised Emma, and seemed to satisfy Alderman, who asked sharp questions and got sharp answers, and made his notes with the focused efficiency of a man who was building something in real time and knew exactly which pieces he was working with. When it was done, Alderman set his pen down and looked at Douglas for a long moment. "Mr. McCrae," he said, "I'm going to tell you something that may be of interest. The property your father left, the 420 acres in Hart County, has been subdivided and partially sold over the past 3 decades. What remains of it is approximately 200 acres that Vernon McCrae still holds in his own name." Douglas said nothing. "If this will is authenticated, and I expect it will be given the corroborating documents we're assembling, your claim to half of the original property or its equivalent value is legally viable." Alderman paused. "You may wish to engage an attorney." Douglas looked at his hat for a long moment. Something moved across his face, not greed, not triumph. Something more like a man who had carried a weight so long he'd forgotten what it was supposed to feel like to set it down. "I don't want the land," he said finally. "I want—" He stopped. "I want what it represents in court. I want it on the record that he took it." Alderman nodded once slowly. "That," he said, "I can absolutely guarantee you." The clock on Alderman's wall said 11:30 when Emma first heard the horses. She was back in the main office sitting with her father's letters in her lap, reading them for perhaps the 100th time in her life. She heard the hoofbeats before the deputy called out, and she was at the window before he opened the door. Cole was in front. He was riding fast, not panicked fast, but purposeful fast, the kind of pace that meant things had happened and needed to be reported. Briggs was beside him. Behind them came 2 deputies, and between the deputies, riding with his hands bound to the saddle horn, was Vernon McCrae. Emma's breath left her body. He was not struggling. He was not shouting. He was sitting absolutely straight, with his black hat still on his head, and his face was the face of a man who had not yet decided what posture to assume because he was still calculating whether there was a posture that could help him. The strongbox was on the back of one of the deputy's horses, roped to the saddle. It was a plain iron box, smaller than Emma had imagined, battered at the corners from years of use. It was locked. She was at the courthouse steps when they pulled up. Cole swung off the roan and looked at her with the brief, assessing look she'd come to recognize as his version of asking if she was all right. She nodded once. He nodded back. "We found it," he said. "Exactly where Rook said." "The letters," Emma said. "In the box," Cole said. "Still locked. Alderman has the only key now." He glanced at the iron box. "He kept them, Emma. Everything. Going back to at least 1845 from what Briggs estimates. 30 years of other people's letters in bundles organized by family name." The world went a little quiet around Emma. Organized by family name. He had kept them organized. Like a filing system. Like a professional archive of the lives he'd stolen from. Vernon was being brought down from his horse. He landed on his feet and straightened, immediately pulling his coat into order. And when he looked up and saw Emma standing on the steps, he met her eyes with a steadiness that was either courage or calculation. With Vernon, it was always hard to tell which. "Miss Hartley," he said. "Mr. McCrae," she said. He looked at the courthouse, at Alderman's door. Something moved in his face, the first hairline crack she'd ever seen in the certainty he wore like a second skin. "Whoever's been talking," he said, "I can explain." "Mr. McCrae," Briggs said. "You'll want to stop talking now." Vernon stopped. Briggs took him inside. Emma watched him go, this man who had been the shape of threat in her life for 3 years, who had taken her mother's fear and her father's name, and 30 years of other families' lives, walking through Alderman's courthouse door in the middle of a summer morning with his hands bound and his options running out. She stood on the steps and breathed the warm air and felt for the first time in longer than she could remember the specific absence of dread. Not happiness, not triumph. Just the clean structural relief of a weight removed. Cole came to stand beside her. "There were 7 families," he said quietly. "That's what Briggs counted in the initial look at the contents. 7 sets of documents organized by name. Yours is one of them." "The Pruitts," Emma said. "Yes," Cole said. "The Pruitts are in there." Emma thought about the widow Pruitt, about 2 children in the county home, about what it would mean for them when this came out, whether any of it could be undone or only acknowledged. "Can it be reversed?" she said. "For the families who already lost property." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Some of it," he said. "Depends on what's been sold and to whom. Property transferred to innocent buyers in good faith is complicated. But the money the debt payments collected under fraudulent instruments, that's recoverable with the right legal argument." He paused. "Alderman will sort it. He's the right man for it." "He's a good man," Emma said. "He's a hard man," Cole said, which in this particular situation is the same thing. Emma turned to look at him. He was facing the street, watching the town go about its ordinary business around the extraordinary morning, and his face was doing what it usually did, holding most of itself in reserve, offering only what was immediately relevant. "The strongbox," she said. "If you hadn't believed Rook—" "You believed Rook first," Cole said. "We both did," she said. He looked at her. The morning light was direct and honest, and it showed everything the saloon's lamplight had kept partial. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the gray coming in at his temples, the specific quality of his stillness. That she understood now was not distance, but the practiced equilibrium of someone who had learned to stand inside difficult things without being knocked over by them. "What happens now?" Emma said. "To you, I mean, after this." Cole looked back at the street. "Alderman may need me for the testimony. Few days at most." He paused. "After that—" "Where do you go?" Emma said. "After that." He was quiet long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "I had a job in Montana." Before I stopped in Dusty Springs. Warrant for a man outside of Helena. He said it the way he said most things, flat and informational. I was just passing through. You stopped, Emma said. I did, he said. Why? He looked at her again. I told you why. You told me about Rebecca, Emma said. You told me she reminded you of her, but I told you I'm not her. No, he said. Not. He said it directly, which was the only way he said anything. You're someone who faced down a federal forgery case with a box of letters and $30. $43, Emma said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. $43, he said, and beat a 30-year scheme through sheer refusal to accept that legal documents meant legal truth. He paused. That's not Rebecca. That's you. Entirely you. Emma felt something warm move through her chest, quiet and certain. I don't know what I'm going to do, she said. After this, I can't go back to the saloon. I can't go back to being... She stopped. What you were, Cole said. What I was, she agreed. 3 days ago, I thought that was the only option. Work in that saloon and pay a debt that wasn't mine until I was old enough to be too tired to care. She looked at the courthouse door. Now there's no debt, and no saloon I can walk back into without knowing I'm the person who walked out of it. That's not a loss, Cole said. No, she said. I know that. I just don't know what comes next. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Alderman mentioned to me before we left for the ranch that he has been trying for 2 years to find someone to manage the territorial court's document review process. Someone who can read legal instruments, identify inconsistencies, understand what forged paperwork looks like. He kept his eyes on the street. He said it required someone with attention to detail, familiarity with period documentation, and the particular kind of stubbornness that refuses to accept a document at face value. Emma stared at him. He said that, she said. Before we left for the ranch, Cole said. Before he knew about Douglas. Before the strongbox. He paused. He said it while you were upstairs at the hotel. He was thinking about offering me a position, Emma said, while Vernon McCrae was still standing in his street. Alderman thinks about the next problem while he's solving the current one, Cole said. It's one of his better qualities. Emma looked at the courthouse. She thought about what it would mean to work with documents, with evidence, to be the person who looked at a piece of paper and saw what was actually there, rather than what someone had arranged for her to see. She thought about 7 families and 30 years of organized theft, and all the things that might have been caught earlier if someone had been looking. Montana, she said. Cole looked at her. You said you had work in Montana, she said. And Millhaven is on the way to Montana from Dusty Springs, more or less. More or less, he said carefully. So you weren't completely going out of your way, she said. I was somewhat going out of my way, Cole said. Emma looked at him steadily. Would you have gone the rest of the way if I'd said no to Alderman? If there had been no position here, no reason to stay? Would you have just ridden to Montana and finished your warrant and moved on to the next thing? The question sat in the summer air between them. Cole turned to face her fully, which he rarely did. He usually kept part of himself angled toward the room or the street, the reflex of a man who didn't like to have his back to an exit. But he turned and looked at her directly and said, I don't know. It was the most honest thing he could have said. She recognized it as such. I've been moving for 3 years, he said. Since Rebecca, since my daughter. Moving is easy. It's the stopping that... He stopped. I don't know how to want things anymore, he said. I knew how to want things before. I had a farm and a wife and a daughter, and I knew exactly what the future looked like. Then I didn't. And moving filled the space where the knowing used to be. Emma thought about her mother, who had spent 20 years making herself small and ended up smaller than she'd started. She thought about Douglas McCrae, who had carried a will for 28 years because putting it down felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. She thought about all the ways people carried their damage and called it survival. You stopped in Dusty Springs, Emma said. I did, he said. "You could stop again," she said. She did not say it as an invitation exactly. She said it as a fact, the way he said things plain and without pressure, laying it on the table for someone else to pick up or leave. Cole looked at her for a long moment. The morning was full around them, horses and voices, and the ordinary sounds of a town that had no idea that the world had just shifted on its axis for 7 families and 1 man in chains and 1 woman on the courthouse steps, who was no longer the person she'd been 3 days ago. Then the courthouse door opened, and Alderman appeared in it, looking at them both with the pragmatic impatience of a man who had a great deal of paperwork about to arrive. "Miss Hartley," he said, "I need you inside. McCrae's attorney has just arrived from Dusty Springs, and he's asking to see the primary plaintiff." Emma looked at Alderman. She looked at the door. She thought about the attorney and whatever argument he'd been sent to make and what she was going to say to it. Then she looked at Cole. "Will you come in?" she said. Cole picked up his hat from where he'd been holding it, settled it back on his head, and said, "Yes." They went inside together. What happened in the following 3 hours was not dramatic by the standards of what had come before. It was the slower, grinding work of truth. Vernon's attorney presenting arguments that Alderman systematically dismantled, each dismantling, requiring Emma to produce a document, or confirm a fact, or describe a specific detail that she had, because she had always been paying attention, because attention had been her only weapon for 3 years, and she had learned to use it with precision. Vernon sat through all of it with his hands in his lap, and his face doing its careful work of maintaining composure. But Emma watched him, and what she saw underneath the composure was not fear exactly. Fear required an acknowledgement that you'd done something wrong, and Vernon had never gotten there, but something colder. The dawning recognition of a man who had believed in the absolute reliability of a system that was now failing him, and could not quite process the failure because the system had never failed before. His attorney, a thin man named Hecht, who had the distracted manner of someone being paid well to argue something he privately knew was lost, made the strongest case he could about the chain of custody of the documents and the credibility of the witnesses. Alderman listened to all of it. He asked 3 questions. He wrote 2 things down. Then Douglas McCrae walked into the room. Vernon's face changed. Emma had been watching for it. She saw the exact moment Vernon saw his brother, the absolute stillness that moved through him, the way his hands stopped moving in his lap, the thing that crossed his face that was not guilt, but was something adjacent to it, the particular horror of being seen by someone who knew the original version of you. "Douglas," Vernon said. His voice came out different than usual, lower, stripped of its management. "Vernon," Douglas said. He sat down across the table without being invited and put the will between them. "Father's handwriting," he said. "You know it as well as I do." Vernon looked at the will. He looked at it for a long time. His attorney said, "Vernon, quiet." Vernon said. He looked at the will. He looked at Douglas. Something moved in his face that Emma thought might have been 30 years ago, the beginning of the man he could have been, instead of the one he'd become. It passed quickly. "You've been carrying that," Vernon said. "All this time." "All this time," Douglas said. "You came back for a piece of paper," Vernon said. "I came back," Douglas said, "because someone had the courage I didn't." He looked at Emma. "Because it was past time." Vernon looked at Emma. The look was different from every other look he'd given her. Not cold, not calculating. Not the smile of a man who expected to win. It was the look of someone who had finally precisely understood what they were dealing with. "You're not what I thought you were," he said. "No," Emma said. "I'm not." Alderman cleared his throat. "Mr. McCrae, your attorney may wish to discuss with you the current state of the evidence and the available options. I'll give you 20 minutes. He stood. "The rest of you outside, please." They filed out. Emma Cole Douglas, the deputies Briggs. The door closed. In the hallway, Douglas looked at Emma. "Thank you," he said. "You brought the will," she said. "You made it possible to bring it," he said. "There's a difference." She shook her head. "You carried it for 28 years, she said. "I didn't carry mine for 3 days without help." She looked at Cole standing at the end of the hall with the Colt on his hip, and the patient quiet of someone who understood that some conversations didn't require his presence, but could be available if they did. "None of us do this alone," she said. That's the thing Vernon never understood. He spent 30 years building a system that depended on people being isolated. One family at a time, one debt at a time, keeping everyone separate so no one could see the pattern. "And you saw it," Douglas said. "Rook saw it," she said. "You saw it." Cole saw the signature in 30 seconds. She shook her head. "I just kept the letters." The 20 minutes passed. Hecht came out of the room first, looking the way attorneys looked when they'd advised a client to accept something the client didn't want to accept. Alderman came out second. He looked at Briggs. "He'll enter a plea," Alderman said, "in exchange for full cooperation with the identification of all fraudulent instruments and full restitution to all affected parties." Briggs let out a long breath. "All 7 families, all 7, Alderman said, plus his brother." He looked at Douglas. "Full half value of the original property in cash or equivalent within 60 days. He looked at Emma. 3 years of payments made against a fraudulent debt returned in full. And the property, your mother's house, stays yours. Clear title, no liens." Emma stood in the hallway of the Millhaven courthouse on a summer morning and heard the words "clear title," as though they were in a language she was just now learning to understand. Something moved through her chest, not the hot flash of anger she'd been running on for 3 days, not the compressed readiness of someone waiting for the next blow, but something slow and quiet and fundamental. The feeling of ground under her feet. Real ground. Hers. She pressed her lips together hard and breathed through her nose. Alderman looked at her over his spectacles with the direct pale eyes that had been reading situations for 50 years. "You did this," he said. "Whatever else happens, whatever the courts work out over the next year, this started with you walking into this courthouse with a box of letters and a determination that the truth was worth the ride." Emma nodded. She didn't trust her voice entirely. "My offer stands," Alderman said. "Document review position. Territorial court. It pays enough to live on, and the work is—" He paused, considering well suited to someone with your particular combination of skills and temperament. "I'll take it," Emma said. Alderman nodded satisfied and went back inside. Emma turned to find Cole already looking at her. He'd been watching the whole exchange from the end of the hall, and she had the feeling, not for the first time, that he had seen all of it with the same focused attention. He gave everything, not missing a detail, not offering commentary, just present. "Millhaven," he said. "You'll stay?" "Yes," she said. "For now." She paused. "Montana will be there when your warrant is finished." Cole looked at her steadily. "It'll take a week," he said. "The warrant, maybe less." "A week is enough time to find your way back," Emma said. "If you know where you're going." He said nothing for a moment. He looked at the courthouse door, at the hallway, at the ordinary, unremarkable fact of a building where the law was doing what it was supposed to do. Then he looked at Emma Hartley, 22 years old, standing in a courthouse hallway in borrowed determination and trail dust, who had ridden through a summer night and faced down a federal fraud case with her father's letters, and her own refusal to accept that the world was arranged the way powerful men arranged it, and something in his face did what it very rarely did. It opened. "I know where I'm going," he said. Emma looked at him. The warmth that had been quiet in her chest since the courthouse steps settled into something more permanent. The way true things settled, not with noise, not with declaration, but with the solid structural certainty of something that has found its right place and intends to stay there. "Good," she said. Outside Millhaven went about its summer afternoon horses and voices and the ordinary life of a territory town that had no idea what had just been decided inside its courthouse. Somewhere in the building, Vernon McCrae was being led to a cell. Somewhere Douglas McCrae was sitting with the will that had waited 28 years to matter. Somewhere in 7 different homes across the county, families who did not yet know their names were in a strongbox, were about to get word that the debt was not real and never had been. And Emma Hartley walked out of the Millhaven courthouse into the full summer light with clear title to her mother's house and her father's letters, and a position that would let her spend her days making sure that no one else's truth went unseen for lack of someone willing to look at it. And Cole Harrison walked beside her, one step to her right, exactly where he'd been since the night she grabbed that knife in the Red Canyon Saloon, and decided once and for all that she was finished being afraid. Some women are saved by being rescued. Emma Hartley saved herself with a box of letters. The truth and the refusal to let either go, and that made all the difference.